By February of 1993, 27-year-old Gary Sudbrink, originally from Long Island, New York, was a captain in the Air Force. Assigned to a medical pharmacy in San Antonio, Texas, Gary had decided to come home and visit his family without telling anyone ahead of time. A surprisingly important note to add before we get into the meat of this story. Gary arrived at his parents' home without issue the first weekend of February, but almost immediately thereafter, things started to get weird. On the evening of Monday, February 8th, Gary decided to call one of his old friends, Mike, hoping to make plans to get together and hang out while he was in town. However, during this call, Mike told Gary that they had actually spoken to one another the day before, which Gary knew wasn't the case, because surely he'd remember that conversation, right? Despite Gary not believing what Mike was telling him, Mike insisted that Gary had called him on the phone the day before, or at least someone that sounded just like him, who called himself Gary, claimed to have flown in through LaGuardia Airport, and claimed to be getting over a cold. In reality, Gary had flown in through JFK and was in good health at the time, so this seemed to have been a weird mistake or a mix-up of some kind. The alternatives were just unsettling to think about. However, while Gary was talking to his friend at approximately 10:30 p.m., trying to figure out what was going on, another call came into his parents' phone line. What he heard made him pause, enough so that he pressed record on a nearby answering machine when it became clear that this was no regular phone call. You'll hear Gary's mother pop in for a moment in the middle of the call, and his father do the same near the end, popping in through another landline to listen in.
Yes. I'll tell you who it is.
Hello?
Yeah. Do you want to speak to him?
It's Gary's Sudbrink there.
Yeah, who's this? Steven? Are you playing games with me or what? Huh? Steven, if you're playing games, I'm going to kick your ass.
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
Huh?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Yeah, this is you, Steven, you idiot. You're pissing me off. You jerk. I'm going to get you on... Let's see what it says. Review. One new call out of area. Is Steven out of the area?
How long are you going to be back from Texas?
Wait, say that again?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Wait, hold on. Is Steven out of the calling area or what?
What do I know?
What do you mean you don't know? He's in Queens. Well, who are you talking to? I don't know who the fuck.
Hello?
Hello?
It's Gary's Sudbrink there.
Who is this? Sounds like a freaking robot.
So
Hello?
how long are you going to be back from Texas?
What was that again, sir?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Oh, be quiet, Alf, huh? Sorry, would you see that again? Hello? Being impersonated by what voice?
Hello?
Yeah. Hello?
It's Gary's Sudbrink there.
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, what is your question? I'll answer it.
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
How long?
You're being impersonated by the other voice.
Right. When am I coming back? Is that your question? Okay, there was a break. Hold on. You want to know when I'm coming back to Texas? Oh, is that your question?
So how long are you going to be back from Texas?
How long am I going to be back from Texas? That question doesn't make any sense.
By the other voice.
Okay. I'll be coming back eventually. I can't tell you when. You should know that question, answer to the questions, because you seem to know more about me than I do. You know what I'm saying?
Are you an intergalactic person?
Are you a space alien?
Sounds like he hung up.
I can't believe this.
He hung up, Gary.
See if he comes back.
All right, I'll hang up.
Oh my God, man. I'm calling Mike back.
As you just heard, the caller is speaking slowly and almost mechanically. It sounds like their voice has been altered in some way, slowed down and distorted to sound robotic or even alien in nature. You may have noticed that throughout this call, Gary makes mention of a man named Steven. Steven is Gary's older brother, who he believes might have been calling and messing around with him, even though Steven wasn't necessarily known as a prankster or a joker of this kind. And as you heard, Gary's parents jumped on the call for a moment, thinking that they'd be able to guess the identity of the caller. They were not able to, however, due to how cryptic the caller sounded and the rather weird things they were saying. I've tried to clean up the audio as best as possible, but even then, it can be hard to make out what the caller says at certain points. Twice they seem to say, through stammers, "Is Gary Sudbrink there?" They then say, multiple times, "You were being impersonated by the other voice." And then 5 times in this call alone, they ask, "How long are you going to be back from Texas?" I'd like to credit the Reddit user Peanut Butter Jelly for transcribing this audio, because certain parts of it are rather hard to make out. My first impression of this audio is that the caller was possibly using a soundboard of some type, with them seeming to repeat certain phrases over and over again. However, computer soundboards weren't really available at this point in 1993, so if they were, it implies some kind of radio or audio experience. Nonetheless, a little while after this call, just after 11 p.m., the caller called back, and Gary was quick to hit record on the answering machine again.
What is your question? Yes, speaking. Yes. Could I answer any questions for you?
Are you back from Texas?
Not back yet, no.
How long are you going to be back from Texas?
Let me answer. First, you tell me, where are you calling from?
This is Gary Sudbrink.
Yeah, why don't you tell me where you're calling from?
Who is this?
What do you mean, who is this? You should know who it is. It's me, Gary. Wait, let me ask you this question. Where are you calling from? Okay, I'll be back. Excuse me? I can't hear too well. Yeah, it is a full moon out. That's true. Could you identify yourself? Identify yourself. Why are you calling me? Excuse me? I cannot hear too well.
Get on the other phone, it's better.
Hold on, let me switch phones.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Now, who are you?
Keep an eye in the sky, he said.
Keep an eye in the sky?
Yeah.
Ask him, can I talk to him?
Shh, shh.
I had a sighting.
Okay, hold on. Repeat that again. Please repeat. Okay.
Near Orion. Holy mackerel. Tonight or guess on when? The full moon. They told.
Double from here.
Repeat.
Tell them I like to talk.
Okay. Repeat last word. I'm hearing static.
Tell them I like to talk to them.
He hung up.
He hung up.
Hello?
This call seems to be a bit harder to make out because of the speaker's low volume, so I'll try and go through bits of it. The caller first asks if it's Gary on the other end, and if he's back from Texas, and then repeats some of the lines from the first call. How long are you going to be back from Texas? And is this Gary Sudbrink? They then ask, in one of the stranger moments of the call, who is this? Here, though, is where it gets truly odd. The caller, in their low, mechanical, almost Buffalo Bill-sounding voice, say, "Keep an eye on the skies, near Orion, the full moon." The caller repeats these lines a few times before Gary's dad jumps on the line, seeming to be a believer in the paranormal or extraterrestrial. Gary's father inquires about certain lines that the caller says, particularly when they say, "near Orion." His father's intrigue possibly fuels Gary's throughout the call, so that's something to keep in mind. Approximately half an hour later, while Gary and his parents were discussing the 2 phone calls they had already received, their phone rang yet again. This time, the caller seemed to take a while to begin actually making any noise, and seemed quieter than ever, so listen closely. Also at the beginning, Gary's father makes mention of a Brian. That's just an erroneous mistake in the moment, as Brian is Gary's other brother.
Okay. Yeah, it's taking time for him to talk. Who is this? Stephen, this is not funny, you know.
Brian, it's not Steven.
What do you mean, Brian?
I mean, Gary.
How do I know it's not Stephen?
It's not Steven. Hello? I had a UFO experience in West Virginia, which you probably know. And I know that you're into an intergalactic person. Can you speak a little louder? Sir? Can you speak a little louder? Louder?
Let me speak to him, Dad. I guess, I don't know what his...
All right, I'll hang up so you can talk to me. He wants to talk to you.
Okay. Hello, can I help you?
Hello.
Yes.
There's gotta be something like
Yes, that's me. Yes, could you please identify yourself? Identify.
Oh, you're back from Texas.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm in Texas right now. Oh, he asked me a question. No, I'm in New York right now. You know that. Why are you asking me such a question? Yes. Stephen, if this is you, I swear to God, I'm going to be pissed. Huh? I'm trying to listen to him. Who are... Excuse me? Okay. Eventually, I'll be back from Texas. Could you speak more? Please speak more. I guess it's not Stephen. I believe it because I'm getting static.
People have not raised 3 times.
Let me go on this phone because I can never hear on this phone. Hold on. Okay. Okay, please speak. Hello?
Keep an eye on the sky.
Okay. Should I go out right now?
Right.
Right now?
The full moon.
Okay, see, I'm not sure where Orion is now, but we'll go outside.
Show double from you.
It would show double from me. Repeat that again?
During this call, the caller repeats some of the same phrases, but sometimes in slightly different variations. Is Gary Sudbrink there? Here is Gary Sudbrink. Is this Gary Sudbrink? They then repeat some of the same phrases from the prior 2 calls. Are you back from Texas? Keep an eye on the skies. Orion. The full moon. Show double from you. As you heard, Gary's father was intrigued by the call throughout, seeming to believe that he and his son were communicating with an extraterrestrial, someone he refers to a few times as an intergalactic person. He also references a prior experience he'd had in West Virginia. This third call, which came in at approximately 11:38 p.m., would prove to be the Sudbrink's final phone call from this mysterious individual on the evening of February 8th, 1993. However, it would not be the last mysterious phone call they would receive from this unknown person or persons. That would come the next night, February 9th, in what would prove to be the weirdest phone call yet. Now, we're going to pause for just a moment to hear a word from today's sponsors. The following night, Tuesday, February 9th, 1993, Gary Sudbrink was still with his parents. They had been unable to talk about much without reverting back to the series of strange phone calls they'd received the night prior. That evening, Gary's uncle, Tom, had also come to visit. He was still there when the family's phone rang just before 10:30 p.m., and you will hear him pop in for a moment in the recorded conversation that followed.
Yes, this is me. Can I speak to you? Can I ask why you're... Yes, can I ask why you're calling? Can I please ask... Yes, this is. Yes, that is me.
To be within this planet.
Say that again?
And this planet.
Leave?
We come
I'm staying right here.
to be within this planet.
Is this a joke or what?
To many. To be contact. As the same with you.
I have to think about that. I'd like to see you.
To many. To be contact. As the same with you.
Hey, let me tell you something. I've been listening to you. And I've had contacts with you.
Government interference? You have? Please explain what type of interference. Okay.
Interference. Visitations to be disrupted by them. Appears. Sun will rise on dark side of world. No.
The sun will rise from the dark side of the moon.
Okay, what branch of the government? What should I do?
Beware. Government interference. Visitations to be disrupted by them.
Okay. Is that good for me or bad? They hung up.
Yeah.
This phone call, the longest of the bunch, features some of the strangest comments and questions yet from the mysterious individual on the other end of the line. First, the caller begins by saying some similar statements to those from the night before. Is Gary Sudbrink there? Is this Gary Sudbrink? And at one point, just saying Gary Sudbrink. But then, the caller starts veering into new territory, things that are extraterrestrial in nature. We come to be within this planet. In this planet, we come to be within this planet, to visit the many, to be contacted as the same with you. This final line they repeated at least once. As soon as Gary's uncle pops on the line, the caller then changes the script and enters some eerie Men in Black territory. Beware, government interference. Beware, government interference. Visitations to be disrupted by them. Then, toward the end of the call, with their voice being surrounded by static and some distorted background noise, the caller then plays some of their greatest hits thus far. Appears, the sun will rise on, dark side of moon, world, no, on the moon, show double from you, beware, government interference, visitations to be disrupted by them. Over the years, audio from these phone calls has been used in various forums, conferences, panels, or even shows discussing UFOs or UAPs, to make inferences to the caller being extraterrestrial in nature. As you heard in the call itself, Gary's father and his uncle seemed to be believers, with his father making mention of the caller being an intergalactic person, at times even seeming to press the issue when Gary himself was skeptical. But the reason that I bring all this up is that there is some context that I haven't quite given yet. If you recall, at the beginning of this episode, I told you that the first phone call was preceded by Gary talking to his friend, Mike. Mike told Gary that the day before he had received a similar call from someone that sounded just like Gary, claiming to have come to visit family. However, in this call, the individual calling himself Gary claimed to have flown in through an incorrect airport and was sick at the time, so he wasn't able to hang out while visiting. None of this was true, other than Gary coming back home to visit family, of course, but Gary had no explanation for this discrepancy. He hadn't told any of his friends or family that he was coming back to visit before he did so. But just wait, things get even a little weirder. Approximately 1 year or so earlier, during one of Gary's last trips back home to Long Island, his brother Steven, the same one he mentioned in the phone calls, had recalled seeing someone driving alongside him on the highway, in a vehicle similar to the one that Gary drove back home in Texas nonetheless. This individual apparently looked just like Gary and made some strange faces at his brother while driving and then drove off. Stephen had been en route to a wedding at the time that Gary was also attending, so when they were both there, they spoke about this reported encounter. They determined that it hadn't been Gary, despite the similarities. Gary had already been at the wedding at the time of this reported encounter and wasn't even driving at the time. He had flown up for the wedding and left his vehicle back home in Texas. So back during the first phone call, when you hear Gary mention Stephen and think he's getting a prank pulled on him, he thinks it's related to that incident from a year prior. So that strange encounter, paired with his phone call to his friend Mike, made Gary question the content of the phone calls entirely. In the years since, it's led way to the theory that Gary might have had a strange doppelganger of sorts, especially when you factor in some of the quotes made by the mysterious caller, including, "show double of you," and "you're being impersonated by the other voice." To give even more ammunition to those that think this story has some paranormal or extraterrestrial link, while Gary was at the airport in Texas getting ready to fly home, he had been approached by a man with a clipboard who asked him details, such as his name, its spelling, where he was going, and some other personal info. As Gary tells it, he just assumed the man was a salesman or someone taking a census, so he didn't think twice of it. He just answered the questions and went about his day. However, after boarding his flight to New York, he was approached by another guy with a clipboard, who sat down in the seat next to him and asked him some similar questions. Gary asked this man to leave him alone, and moments later was seemingly rescued by a stewardess who told the guy with the clipboard that he wasn't sitting in his assigned seat. However, this man just temporarily moved to the seat behind Gary and continued to pester him for a few more minutes, before eventually being shooed away. Gary wouldn't see this man for the rest of the flight, nor when they were disembarking the plane. Yet he felt perturbed enough by the encounter to call his landlord to keep an eye on his apartment while he was on Long Island. If we take the theory that this has some sort of extraterrestrial link at face value, we can only assume that a doppelganger of sorts was attempting to live in Gary's shoes for a brief time, perhaps using the encounters at the airport to learn about his personal information. For what reason, we can only guess at. However, if this were true, a large assumption to make, I understand, then maybe the mysterious, creepy-sounding caller was attempting to call Gary to warn him of this imposter. Again, for what reason, we can only guess at. The alternative to all of this, of course, is the theory that this is a prank or a hoax of some sort, possibly even one pulled at the expense of Gary, maybe even by his friends or family. Throughout the calls, Gary believes that his brother Stephen is responsible for them. Despite not having a history of pulling pranks like this, Stephen is the person who told Gary the year beforehand about the weird doppelganger that he saw on the road. Maybe this was all part of an elaborate running joke that never got revealed. It's also worth pointing out that Gary's father and uncle seem to have been very into UFOs and paranormal culture. Not only had they gone to study an alleged UFO crash the year prior, 1992, but they were part of a Long Island UFO group prior to this phone call taking place. And as reported by Ario62 on Reddit, they had been featured in magazines and newsletters focusing on UAPs, including reporting their own UFO experience. Maybe they tried pulling off this prank to convince Gary of the existence of extraterrestrials, but had failed in the finer workings of it. Throughout the 4 phone calls, the mysterious callers seemed to use a soundboard of sorts, or at least they repeated several scripted lines that were all incredibly close to one another. Many of the phrases repeat and seem to sound identical. Maybe the caller used a tape recorder throughout, which would explain some of the distorted whirring or scratching noises picked up on the recordings. I could even see someone at this point using a tape recorder similar to Kevin McAllister's from Home Alone 2, which coincidentally came out in November of 1992, just a few months before these phone calls were reportedly recorded. In the decades since these phone calls were recorded, some have also questioned why Gary was ready to record the calls so quickly, and if he would have had the means to do so with a simple answering machine. While I do know that some would have been able to record snippets of phone calls, the ability to record entire 3 to 4 minute long conversations is debatable. At least, growing up in the mid to late 90s, I don't remember having that ability with my own family's answering machines, but maybe I'm just mistaken in that though. Some online have theorized that these phone calls might have been part of a traffic pumping scheme, in which local exchange telephone carriers in rural parts of the US would inflate the volume of incoming calls to their networks, profiting from the increased inter-carrier compensation fees. However, this really didn't come into play until the Telecommunications Act of 1996, so I sincerely doubt it. Regardless, the idea that these calls were pranks or a hoax of some sort has not faded over time. Whenever it comes to anything paranormal or extraterrestrial in nature, my mind goes to a prank or hoax until proven wrong. But with that being said, these phone calls are still incredibly unsettling decades later, especially when paired with all of the odd circumstances surrounding them at the time. To this day, it remains unknown exactly what these strange phone calls were. If they were legitimately paranormal, or if they were a prank or a hoax of some sort. I personally lean toward the latter, but I understand anyone choosing to believe in the former. After all, we can make our own assumptions until proven wrong, and these calls remain a point of mystery decades later. Gary Sudbrink is still around, just no longer in the Air Force, working as a pharmacist in Pennsylvania. Despite appearing occasionally on shows to talk about these mysterious calls from a generation ago, doing so as a skeptic, believing that they were a prank himself, he remains a rather private person. He doesn't seem to be after a significant amount of attention or notoriety for the calls, and doesn't seem to share his family's belief that the caller was an intergalactic person of some sort. Rather, he seems to be just a normal guy caught up in a strange story. For that reason, I think it's likely that someone was trying to pull a fast one on Gary, and simply never let him in on the joke, seeing how it spiraled into an obscure mystery in the years since. But who knows? Maybe Gary has been in on it from the beginning, and simply enjoys seeing his story spread to the dark corners of the internet. If he did, could we blame him? It's a pretty creepy mystery, but it's also innocent and a little fun. Regardless, as of this episode's recording, the odd tale of Gary Sudbrink remains unresolved.